My name is Pam. I am 58 years old. I have spent my entire life caring for my family, loving them with everything I have. My husband Harold passed away 6 years ago from cancer. My son Derek is all I have left in this world. I always believed that a mother's love would be returned somehow someday. But there are moments in life when just one sentence can shatter everything you ever believed in. That night, standing in my son's kitchen, I heard words I will never forget. Before I share what happened next, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if stories about family love and finding your strength speak to your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Trust me, you will want to stay for the entire journey. What happened that night changed my life forever, and I believe it might change yours too. Harold and I were married for 32 years. We met at a county fair in Pennsylvania when I was 23 years old. He was standing by the cotton candy stand, wearing a blue flannel shirt and the warmest smile I had ever seen. We talked for 3 hours that night, and by the end of it, I knew I had found my person. We got married the following spring in a small church ceremony with only 40 guests. My mother cried happy tears. His father shook his hand and said, "Son, you found a good one." Our life together was simple but beautiful. Harold worked as an electrician, and I became a nurse. We bought a small house in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, painted the shutters yellow, and planted roses in the front yard. Every Sunday, Harold would sit on the porch with his coffee while I made breakfast. He always said the same thing. "Pam, your cooking is the reason I wake up happy every morning." When Derek came along, our lives became even fuller. He was a colicky baby, crying through most nights for the first 6 months. Harold and I took turns walking him around the living room at 3 a.m, exhausted but grateful. As Derek grew, he became the center of our world. I remember teaching him how to crack eggs when he was 5 years old. He made such a mess, shells everywhere, but he was so proud of himself. "Mom," he said, "I am going to be a chef like you someday." Those words stayed with me for decades. Harold was diagnosed with lung cancer when Derek was 28 years old. The doctors said it was stage 3 and the prognosis was not good. I retired early from nursing to take care of him full time. For 2 years, I was by his side every single day. I held his hand during chemotherapy. I made him soup when he could not eat anything else. I read to him when he was too weak to hold a book. When Harold passed away, a part of me went with him. The house felt empty. The porch where he used to sit with his coffee became a place I could not bear to look at. For months, I moved through life like a ghost, going through the motions, but feeling nothing. Derek was my anchor during that time. He called me every day for the first year. He drove down from his place every other weekend to check on me. He would sit with me in the kitchen and we would talk about his father, about memories, about life. "I am here for you, Mom," he would say. "You are not alone." Those words meant everything to me. Derek had always been a bright boy. He studied hard, got a scholarship to Penn State, and graduated with a degree in software engineering. He landed a good job at a tech company in the city, making more money than Harold and I ever dreamed of. I was so proud of him. My son, the engineer. Harold would have been over the moon. 5 years ago, Derek met Brittany at a work conference in Boston. She was a marketing manager at another company, sharp and ambitious. When Derek first told me about her, his voice was full of excitement. "Mom, I think she might be the one." I wanted to be happy for him. I really did. The first time I met Brittany was at a restaurant in downtown Pittsburgh. She arrived 20 minutes late, wearing designer clothes and carrying a handbag that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She was polite, but there was something distant about her. When I tried to ask about her family, she gave short answers and quickly changed the subject. When the food arrived, she picked at her salad and made a comment about how heavy American cuisine was. I told myself I was being judgmental. I told myself that she was just nervous meeting her boyfriend's mother for the first time. I wanted to give her a chance. Derek and Brittany got married the following year. The wedding was in Boston at a venue that Brittany's parents chose. It was elegant and expensive with ice sculptures and a 12-piece orchestra. I felt out of place the entire time, like a guest at someone else's party rather than the mother of the groom. When I tried to help with the planning, Brittany smiled and said, "Oh, Pam, we have a wedding planner for that. You just relax and enjoy." I told myself she was just being considerate. After the wedding, things changed. Derek called less often. When I visited, Brittany always seemed to have somewhere else to be. The warmth that Derek and I once shared began to fade, replaced by polite but distant conversations. I would bring homemade food when I came to visit, dishes I had made for Derek since he was a child. Brittany would smile and say things like, "Oh, homemade. How quaint," or "We usually order from that French place down the street." I noticed how she would push my food to the side of the refrigerator where it would sit until it expired. I noticed how Derek stopped asking for my recipes. I noticed how the visits became shorter and the calls became less frequent. But I told myself it was normal. Derek had his own family now. He had responsibilities, a wife, a life. I could not expect him to be the same boy who used to crack eggs in my kitchen. Then, 1 month ago, everything changed. Derek called me on a Tuesday evening. His voice sounded lighter than it had in months. "Mom," he said, "Brittany and I are having a party for our 5th wedding anniversary. We are inviting about 40 guests. Brittany mentioned that maybe you could help with some of the food." My heart soared. For the first time in years, I felt truly needed. They wanted my help. They wanted my cooking. Maybe this was a turning point. Maybe this was the beginning of something better. "Of course," I said, trying not to sound too eager. "I would love to help. Just tell me what you need." Derek laughed. "You know, Mom, your classics, the stuff you used to make when I was a kid. Everyone will love it." I hung up the phone and immediately started planning. I pulled out my mother's old recipe box, the one with the faded index cards and handwritten notes. I made a list of dishes. I calculated quantities. I felt alive in a way I had not felt since Harold died. This was my chance. My chance to show them what I could do. My chance to reconnect with my son. My chance to prove that I still had value, that I still mattered. I had no idea what was waiting for me. 3 days before the party, I went shopping. I drove to Whole Foods first, then to the local farmer's market, then to a specialty butcher shop that Harold and I used to visit on special occasions. I wanted the best ingredients, nothing but the best for my son's anniversary. I bought a 12-pound prime rib roast, marbled and beautiful. I bought a honey-glazed ham, organic free-range chicken, and 2 pounds of fresh shrimp. I bought vegetables from local farms, potatoes with the dirt still on them, green beans so fresh they snapped when you bent them. I bought butter and cream and cheese from a dairy that Harold used to love. The total came to nearly $800. I paid with money from my savings account, money I had been setting aside for emergencies. But this was an emergency in a way. An emergency of the heart. The night before the cooking began, I laid everything out on my kitchen counter. I looked at the ingredients and felt a swell of emotion. This was more than food. This was love made tangible. This was every birthday party I had thrown for Derek, every Thanksgiving dinner, every Christmas morning breakfast. This was my mother's recipes and my grandmother's recipes, passed down through 4 generations of women who showed their love through food. I went to bed early that night, but I could not sleep. I was too excited, too hopeful. At 4 a.m, my alarm went off. I got out of bed, put on my comfortable cooking clothes, and went downstairs to the kitchen. The house was quiet. Outside, the sky was still dark. I turned on the lights, put on a pot of coffee, and got to work. The first thing I started was the prime rib. I rubbed it with a mixture of garlic, rosemary, and thyme from my own garden. I let it sit at room temperature for an hour while I prepared the other ingredients. The smell of fresh herbs filled the kitchen, and I closed my eyes for a moment, remembering Harold. He used to stand behind me while I cooked, wrapping his arms around my waist and breathing in the aromas. "Smells like heaven, Pam," he would say. By 6 a.m, the prime rib was in the oven, slow roasting at 250 degrees. I turned my attention to the ham, scoring the skin in a diamond pattern and pressing whole cloves into each intersection. I made a glaze with honey brown sugar and Dijon mustard, brushing it over the ham until it glistened like amber. The hours passed quickly. By noon, I had finished the mac and cheese using my grandmother's recipe that called for 4 different kinds of cheese and a breadcrumb topping made from scratch. I had made the mashed potatoes, whipping them with butter and cream until they were smooth as silk. I had roasted Brussels sprouts with balsamic vinegar and prepared a green bean casserole with homemade mushroom sauce instead of the canned stuff. My back was starting to ache. I had been on my feet for 8 hours straight, and the old injury from my nursing days was flaring up. But I did not stop. I could not stop. There was too much left to do. In the afternoon, I focused on the shrimp cocktail. I poached the shrimp in a court bouillon flavored with lemon and bay leaves, then chilled them in ice water until they were perfectly pink and curled. I made the cocktail sauce from scratch with fresh horseradish that made my eyes water and ketchup that I had canned myself last summer. By evening, the baking began. I made dinner rolls from scratch, kneading the dough by hand until my arms ached. I made cornbread muffins with a hint of honey and jalapeno. I made a Caesar salad with homemade croutons and a dressing that I had perfected over 30 years of trial and error. The desserts took the longest. I made an apple pie using my mother's recipe, the one she had taught me when I was 12 years old. I rolled out the crust, by hand filled it with apples from a local orchard, and wove a lattice top that would have made her proud. I made a chocolate layer cake with ganache frosting, rich and dark and decadent. I made lemon bars with a shortbread crust and a filling so tart it made your mouth pucker. By midnight, I had been cooking for 20 hours. My feet were swollen. My back was screaming. My hands were red and raw from all the chopping and stirring. But I looked at the food spread across my kitchen, and I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Pride. I had made all of this with my own 2 hands. Every dish was a labor of love, a piece of my heart made edible. Derek would taste this food and remember. He would remember who raised him, who taught him, who loved him unconditionally. I worked through the night packaging everything carefully into containers that would keep the food fresh and warm. I labeled each dish with careful handwriting. Prime rib with herb crust, grandmother's mac and cheese, mom's apple pie. By 4 a.m, I was finished. 15 containers sat on my kitchen counter ready to be loaded into the car. I had not slept in 24 hours. I was exhausted beyond words, but I was happy. My neighbor George came over at noon to help me load the car. George was 75 years old, a widower like me. We had become friends over the years, bonding over our shared grief and our love of gardening. He looked at all the containers and shook his head in amazement. "Pam," he said, "your son is one lucky man to have a mother like you." I smiled and thanked him, but inside I was glowing. I believed it too. I believed that Derek would see all of this and feel grateful. I believed that this would be a turning point for us. I got in my car and started the 45-minute drive to Derek's house. The radio was playing softly, and I found myself humming along. The sun was shining, the sky was clear, and I felt hopeful for the first time in months. I imagined Derek's face when he saw the food. I imagined him taking a bite of the prime rib and closing his eyes in pleasure. I imagined him hugging me and saying, "Mom, this is incredible." Thank you. I had no idea how wrong I was. Derek and Brittany lived in a wealthy suburb, the kind of neighborhood where every house had a 3-car garage and a perfectly manicured lawn. Their house was a 2-story colonial with white columns and a circular driveway. It was beautiful, but it had never felt like home to me. I pulled into the driveway at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The party was scheduled to start at 6. I wanted to arrive early to help set up to arrange the food to make sure everything was perfect. I rang the doorbell and waited. After what felt like a long time, Brittany opened the door. She was wearing a designer dress, her hair freshly styled, her makeup immaculate. She looked at me with an expression that I could not quite read. "Oh, Pam," she said, "you are early." I smiled, trying to ignore the lack of warmth in her voice. "I wanted to come early to help set up. I have all the food in the car." Brittany glanced at my car, then back at me. She did not offer to help. She did not even step aside to let me in right away. Finally, she moved back and gestured vaguely toward the house. "Come in, I suppose. Derek is upstairs getting ready." I walked into the house, my arms full of the first container. The living room was already decorated with flowers and candles. A long table had been set up in the dining room, covered with a white linen cloth and elegant place settings. And then I saw it. On the table was a printed menu card. "Catering by La Maison Elegante," it read. Below that was a list of dishes: filet mignon with truffle butter, lobster bisque, endive salad with goat cheese and walnuts. My heart sank. I turned to Brittany, trying to keep my voice steady. "I thought you wanted me to bring the food." Brittany smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Oh, we do appreciate your help, Pam, but we also hired a caterer. 40 guests is a lot. We wanted to make sure we had enough. Enough. As if my 24 hours of cooking would not be enough." I swallowed my disappointment and forced a smile. Of course. I understand. Where should I put my dishes? Brittany looked around the dining room where every surface was already covered with the caterer's elegant preparations. Her brow furrowed as if my food was an inconvenience she had not anticipated. Maybe the kitchen, she suggested. I carried my containers to the kitchen, making trip after trip to the car. Brittany did not offer to help. She stood in the living room adjusting flower arrangements and checking her phone. The kitchen was already crowded with the caterer's equipment, chafing dishes, warming trays, silver platters. There was barely any space for my containers. I found a small corner of the counter and began to unpack, but it quickly became clear that there was no room. Brittany appeared in the doorway. Actually, Pam, I just thought of something. Maybe we could put your dishes in the garage. We have a folding table out there. That way guests can have options. The garage. She wanted me to put my food in the garage. I felt something twist in my chest, but I nodded. Of course, I said. That makes sense. I spent the next hour setting up my food in the garage. It was cold out there and the lighting was dim. I found a folding table in the corner covered in dust. I wiped it down with paper towels and covered it with a tablecloth I had brought from home. I arranged my dishes as beautifully as I could, but the setting was all wrong. The prime rib looked out of place next to gardening tools. The apple pie sat beneath a bare light bulb. I told myself it did not matter. The food would speak for itself. People would come out here, they would taste it, and they would understand. Derek finally came downstairs around 4:30. He was wearing an expensive suit, his hair styled with gel. He looked handsome, but also different somehow. Harder, more distant. "Hey, Mom," he said, giving me a quick hug. "Thanks for coming." I held on to him for a moment longer than he expected. I wanted to feel close to him, to remember the boy who used to crack eggs in my kitchen. But he pulled away quickly, already looking at his phone. "The food is in the garage," I said. "Do you want to see it?" Derek glanced toward the garage door, then back at his phone. "Yeah, sure. Later. I have to check on some things first." He walked away, and I stood there alone, surrounded by 40 years of love packaged in containers that no one seemed to care about. The guests began arriving at 6. They were mostly Brittany's friends and Derek's colleagues. Well-dressed, sophisticated, talking about vacations in Europe and investments in cryptocurrency. I tried to mingle, but I felt invisible. When I mentioned the food in the garage, people smiled politely and then drifted toward the dining room where the caterer's dishes were being served on silver platters. 2 hours passed. I stood in the living room holding a glass of water, watching my son laugh with his friends. Not once did he come to check on me. Not once did he mention the food I had made. Not once did he introduce me to anyone. I felt like a ghost at my own son's party. I could not take it anymore. The isolation, the dismissal, the feeling of being utterly invisible. I needed to find Derek. I needed to talk to him, to tell him how I felt. Maybe he did not realize what was happening. Maybe he was just caught up in the party and had not noticed. I left the living room and walked through the house looking for my son. I passed groups of guests, chatting and laughing. I passed the dining room where people were eating the caterer's food and raving about how delicious it was. No one looked at me. No one acknowledged my presence. I found the door to the backyard and was about to step outside when I heard Derek's voice coming from a nearby alcove. He was talking with a group of people, and I instinctively stopped, hidden by the corner of the wall. A man's voice spoke first. Someone I did not recognize. "Hey, Derek," he said. "What is with all that food in the garage? Did you guys order extra or something?" I held my breath, waiting for Derek to explain. Waiting for him to tell his friend about his mother's cooking, about the 24 hours I had spent preparing this food, about the recipes passed down through generations. Instead, I heard him laugh. "Oh, that," Derek said. His voice was casual, dismissive. "That is my mom's cooking. She insisted on making food for the party." I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he would say something kind now. Maybe he would tell them how good my food was. But then I heard Brittany's voice, sharp and mocking. "You know how mothers are. They cannot take no for an answer." We tried to tell her we had it covered, but she just had to contribute something. The group laughed. "Is it any good?" someone asked. Derek paused. When he spoke again, his voice was different, lighter, as if he was sharing a joke. "Honestly, it is old-fashioned stuff. Nobody really eats that kind of food anymore. We will probably feed it to the dogs later." The group erupted in laughter. I stood frozen, unable to move. Unable to breathe. Feed it to the dogs. 24 hours of cooking. $800. My mother's recipes. My grandmother's recipes. 4 generations of love and tradition reduced to dog food. I heard Brittany's voice again, dripping with condescension. I told Derek we did not need her help, but he felt guilty. You know she is a widow and all. She has nothing else going on in her life. Derek's response was like a knife to my heart. Yeah, I just did not want her to feel useless. Old people need to feel needed, right? More laughter. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. My knees were weak. My vision was blurring. For a moment, I thought I might collapse right there in the hallway, but then something shifted inside me. I thought about Harold. I thought about the life we had built together, the values we had taught our son. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made, all the love I had given, and I realized that I had given enough. I straightened my spine. I wiped my eyes, and I made a decision. I was not going to stand here and cry. I was not going to beg for scraps of respect from people who saw me as nothing more than a nuisance. I was going to take back what was mine. I was going to take back my dignity. I walked to the garage with a purpose I had not felt in years. My footsteps were steady. My hands were no longer shaking. Something had crystallized inside me, hard and clear like a diamond forged under pressure. The garage was empty when I got there. The food sat untouched on the folding table exactly as I had left it hours ago. The prime rib had cooled. The mashed potatoes had formed a skin on top. The apple pie sat lonely under the dim light, its lattice crust a testament to hours of careful work that no one had bothered to appreciate. I looked at all of it, and I felt a strange sense of calm. I picked up the first container, the prime rib. I closed the lid and set it aside. Then the mac and cheese, then the ham. One by one, I packed up every dish I had made, every container, every piece of food that represented a piece of my heart. As I worked, I felt lighter with each item I packed. I was not just packing food. I was packing away years of accepting less than I deserved. Years of making excuses for people who did not value me. Years of believing that if I just loved hard enough, things would change. Things were not going to change. Not unless I changed them myself. A woman appeared in the garage doorway. She was middle-aged with kind eyes and a worried expression. I recognized her vaguely as someone Derek worked with. "Ma'am," she said, "are you okay? Do you need help with something?" I looked at her and saw genuine concern in her eyes. It was the first genuine human connection I had felt all evening. "I am taking back what is mine," I said simply. She did not seem to understand, but she nodded slowly. "Okay. Is there anything I can do?" I shook my head. "No, thank you, but thank you for asking. You are the first person who has treated me like a human being tonight." Her face fell with sympathy, but I was already turning back to my work. I did not need pity. I needed to finish what I had started. I carried the containers to my car one at a time. My back screamed with every trip, but I did not stop. My arms ached, but I pushed through. Each trip felt like a declaration. I am worth more than this. I deserve better than this. I was loading the last container when Derek appeared. "Mom," he said, his voice confused. "What are you doing?" I straightened up and faced my son. He looked handsome in his expensive suit, but in that moment I barely recognized him. This was not the boy I had raised. This was not the child who had told me my food was the best in the world. This was a stranger who had let his wife's values replace his own. "I am leaving, Derek," I said. My voice was calm, steady. "What?" Derek looked genuinely shocked. "The party is not even over. What is going on? I heard what you said." His face went pale. "What do you mean I heard what you said about my food? About feeding it to the dogs? I heard what Brittany said about me being a pitiful widow with nothing going on in her life. I heard everything." Derek took a step toward me, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Mom, that was just a joke. I did not mean it like that. You know I love your cooking." "A joke?" He thought this was about a joke. "Derek," I said slowly, "I spent 24 hours making this food. I did not sleep. I used recipes from your grandmother and your great-grandmother. Recipes that have been in our family for generations. I spent $800 on ingredients. And to you, it is dog food. To you, I am just a useless old woman who needs to feel needed. Mom, You are overreacting. Those words hit me like a slap. But instead of backing down, I felt something fierce rise up inside me. No, Derek. For the first time in a very long time, I am reacting exactly the right amount. Brittany appeared behind Derek, her arms crossed, her expression irritated. What is going on out here? Guests are starting to ask questions. I looked at my daughter-in-law, the woman who had systematically pushed me out of my son's life, the woman who had made me feel unwelcome in my own family. Let them ask, I said. You can tell them the truth. Tell them how you really feel about your mother-in-law. Tell them I am just a nuisance you tolerate out of guilt. Brittany's face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. You are making a scene. I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a woman who had finally found her voice. No, Brittany. For 5 years I have been silent. For 5 years I have accepted being pushed aside, being dismissed, being treated like an inconvenience. That ends tonight. Derek stepped forward again. Mom, please, let us talk about this inside. We can work this out. I shook my head. There is nothing left to work out. I have spent 5 years trying to be a good mother-in-law, trying to be welcome in your home. And I realize now that I was never welcome. I was tolerated. I was endured. But I was never truly wanted. I opened the car door and paused. I turned back to look at my son one last time. I love you, Derek. I always will. You are my son, and nothing will ever change that. But I cannot keep giving my heart to someone who treats it like garbage. When you are ready to have a real relationship with your mother, a relationship built on mutual respect, you know where to find me. I got in the car and closed the door. Through the window, I could see Derek standing there, his face a mixture of confusion and something else. Shame, maybe. Regret. I started the engine and pulled out of the driveway. I did not look back. As I drove down the street, away from that house and that party and those people who had made me feel so small, I felt something unexpected. Freedom. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. The radio came on and a song was playing. I Will Survive. I laughed out loud alone in my car, driving through the night with 15 containers of food and a heart that was finally beginning to heal. I drove for 45 minutes, my mind racing. The adrenaline of what I had just done was still pumping through my veins. I had stood up for myself. I had walked away. I had refused to be treated like nothing. But as the highway stretched out before me, I started to think about the food. 15 containers of the best cooking I had ever done sitting in the back of my car. I could take it home. But then what? It would just sit in my refrigerator, a reminder of this terrible night. And then an idea came to me. I pulled over to the side of the road and took out my phone. I searched for homeless shelters in Pittsburgh. One came up immediately, just 20 minutes from where I was, open 24 hours. I got back on the road. When I pulled into the parking lot of the shelter, it was nearly 11 at night. The building was plain brick with fluorescent lights glowing through the windows. I parked and sat in the car for a moment, gathering my courage. Then I got out and walked inside. The woman at the front desk looked up with a tired but friendly expression. Can I help you? I hope so, I said. I have food. A lot of it. Enough to feed maybe 40 people. Is there any way I could donate it tonight? Her eyes widened. Are you serious? I nodded. It was supposed to be for a party, but things did not work out. I do not want it to go to waste. I made it myself. She stood up and called to someone in the back room. Within minutes, there were 3 people helping me carry containers from my car to the shelter's kitchen. They kept looking at the food with amazement. This is incredible, one of them said, a young man with a kind face. Prime rib, homemade pie. This is like Christmas dinner. I smiled. I hope everyone enjoys it. They set up the food in the dining area, and word spread quickly through the shelter. People started lining up. Men, women, children. Some were elderly, some were young. All of them looked tired, worn down by life. But as they approached the food, I saw something change in their faces. Hope. I stood behind the serving table and started dishing out portions. Prime rib for one man, mac and cheese for a woman with 2 small children, apple pie for an elderly gentleman who reminded me a little of Harold. Ma'am, the elderly man said after taking his first bite, this is the best meal I have had in years. God bless you. I felt tears prick my eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of joy. A mother with 2 small children came through the line. Her kids looked about 6 and 8 years old. They were quiet, shy, clinging to their mother's legs. When I put food on their plates, their eyes went wide. "Say thank you," the mother said gently. "Thank you," they chorused. "You are very welcome," I said. "Enjoy every bite." The mother looked at me with tears in her eyes. "You have no idea what this means to us. We have not had a meal like this in months." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You deserve this. You all do." For 2 hours, I served food to strangers. People who did not know me, who had no reason to appreciate me, who expected nothing from me. And yet, they were more grateful than my own son had been. When the last of the food was gone, I looked around the room. People were eating, talking, laughing. Children were licking apple pie, filling off their fingers. A man in a worn jacket was closing his eyes as he savored the prime rib. This was what my food was meant for. Not to be hidden in a garage. Not to be mocked and dismissed. It was meant to bring joy. It was meant to bring comfort. It was meant to show people that they mattered. And in that moment, I realized that something important. I mattered, too. The drive home was quiet. George was waiting for me on his porch when I pulled into my driveway. Even at 1 a.m, he was there watching out for me. "How did it go?" he asked as I got out of the car. I told him everything. The caterer, the garage, the overheard conversation, the food to the dogs. And then I told him about the shelter. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something I will never forget. "Pam, you did not just serve food tonight. You served love. And the people who received it knew exactly how precious that gift was. Your son, he will figure it out eventually. But tonight, you gave your heart to people who truly needed it." I hugged George, this gentle old man who had been my friend through so many difficult years. "Thank you," I whispered. When I got inside, I checked my phone. 15 missed calls from Derek. 8 text messages. I read the messages one by one. "Mom, please call me back. I am so sorry. I did not mean what I said. Please just talk to me." I turned off my phone and went to bed. The days after the party were some of the hardest and most liberating of my life. Derek continued to call. At first, several times a day, then once a day, then every few days. I did not answer any of his calls. I was not ready. I needed time to process what had happened, to understand what I wanted to say. Brittany sent me a text message 3 days after the party. "Pam," she wrote, "I think you are being dramatic about all of this. Can we please just move on? It is creating tension in our family." I blocked her number. My sister Dorothy called when she heard what happened. Our extended family had been talking, and word had spread quickly. Dorothy was furious on my behalf. "I always knew that woman was no good," Dorothy said. "And Derek should be ashamed of himself. You deserve so much better than this, Pam." "Thank you," I said. I am starting to believe that myself. Harold's sister, Aunt Meredith, also reached out. She was 82 years old, sharp as a tack, and not one to mince words. "Your husband would be proud of you," she said. "Harold always said you were the strongest woman he knew. You proved him right." I cried after that phone call. But they were good tears. Healing tears. A week after the party, Derek showed up at my door. I was in the garden pulling weeds when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked up and saw Derek getting out. He was alone. No Brittany. He walked toward me slowly, his hands in his pockets, his head bowed. He looked like a little boy who knew he had done something wrong. "Mom," he said when he reached me, "can we talk?" I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees. I led him inside to the kitchen, the room where so many important conversations had happened over the years. The room where I had taught him to cook. The room where Harold and I had told him we were proud of him when he got into college. We sat at the table across from each other. Derek looked at his hands for a long moment before speaking. "I am so sorry," he said finally. His voice cracked. "I was terrible to you. What I said, how I acted, it was inexcusable." I waited. I did not want to make this easy for him. He needed to feel the weight of what he had done. "I have been thinking a lot this past week," Derek continued. "About you and Dad, about how you raised me, about the kind of person I used to be. And I do not know how I became this version of myself, this person who would humiliate his own mother." "I believe you," I said quietly. "But I need you to understand something, Derek. This was not just about one bad night. This has been building for 5 years. Ever since you married Brittany, I have felt pushed out of your life, like I am an embarrassment you need to manage." Derek's eyes filled with tears. I know, and the worst part is I let it happen. I let Brittany's opinions become my own. I was so focused on making her happy that I forgot about the people who actually love me unconditionally. Why, I asked, why did you let this happen? Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised me. Because I was afraid. Brittany is so confident, so sure of everything. When we started dating, I felt like she had everything figured out. She had opinions about everything, about food and clothes and the right way to live. I just went along with it because it was easier than disagreeing. And before I knew it, I had lost myself. I listened without interrupting. This was my son being honest with me for the first time in years. Our marriage is not good. Mom, Derek admitted, it has not been good for a long time. Brittany criticizes everything I do. She makes me feel small, and instead of standing up to her, I took it out on other people. On you. I reached across the table and took his hand. Derek, I said I forgive you, but things cannot go back to how they were before. I need you to show me respect, not just say it. I need to see real change. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I will. I promise. I'm going to make this right. Good, I said, because I love you too much to watch you disappear into someone else's version of who you should be. We talked for 3 hours that day. We talked about Harold, about the family we used to be, about the future Derek wanted to build. He told me he was considering therapy. He told me he was not sure his marriage could survive. He told me he wanted to learn how to cook again to reclaim the parts of himself he had lost. When he left that evening, he hugged me for a long time. I love you, Mom, he said. I love you too, I said. Now go figure out who you really are. 6 months have passed since that terrible night and the beautiful conversation that followed. My life looks different now. I volunteer at the homeless shelter every Saturday. The staff calls me Mama Pam, and the regulars greet me with hugs when I arrive. I have started teaching cooking classes there, showing people how to make meals that are nutritious and affordable. Last month, one of my students got a job at a restaurant. She told me I had changed her life. My relationship with Derek is healing. He comes to visit every 2 weeks, always alone. He and Brittany separated 3 months ago. The divorce is still in progress, but Derek seems lighter, more like himself. We cook together when he visits. He is relearning the recipes I taught him as a child. Last week, he made my mother's apple pie from memory. It was not perfect, I told him with a smile, but it was close. He laughed. I will keep practicing. George and I have become closer. Not in a romantic way. Neither of us is looking for that, but we have found something precious in each other. Companionship. Understanding. Someone to share meals with and stories with and quiet evenings watching the sunset. You know, George said to me one day, my wife used to say that the best relationships are the ones where you do not have to pretend to be anyone other than yourself. I think she was right, I said. Last week I was sitting in my garden surrounded by the roses Harold and I planted together all those years ago. The evening light was golden and the air smelled like summer. I thought about everything that had happened, everything I had lost, and everything I had gained. Someone once asked me if I regretted that night, if I wished I had stayed at the party, kept quiet, pretended I did not hear what Derek said. The answer came easily. That night, I lost a party, but I found something far more valuable. I found myself. For 58 years, I had defined myself through others, through my parents, then through Harold, then through Derek. When Harold died, I clung to Derek even harder, desperate to feel needed, to feel valuable. I thought being a good mother meant sacrificing everything, including my own dignity. I was wrong. Being a good mother means loving your children enough to teach them how to treat you. It means having boundaries. It means walking away when walking away is the healthiest choice. That night in the garage, when I heard my son call my food dog food, something broke inside me. But something else was born. The part of me that knew I deserved better. The part of me that refused to be invisible anymore. I still love Derek. I always will. He is my son, my only child, the baby I walked through the night when he was colicky and difficult. But now, I love him in a different way. a healthier way. I love him enough to expect respect, and he has finally learned to give it. If you are watching this and you have ever felt invisible in your own family, if you have ever been the one who gives and gives and gives and never seems to receive, if you have ever stood in a room full of people and felt completely alone, know that you deserve better. It is not selfish to want respect. It is not dramatic to walk away from people who hurt you. It is survival. Your worth is not determined by how others treat you. Your worth is determined by how you treat yourself. I am 58 years old. I am a widow. I am a mother. And for the first time in my life, I am exactly who I want to be. The food I made that night was never the problem. Their hearts were the problem, and I could not fix their hearts. The only heart I could tend to was my own. So that is what I did, and it made all the difference. So my friends, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had a moment when you finally stood up for yourself, when you decided that you deserved better? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Share your experiences because your voice matters and your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss more stories like this one. And share this video with someone who might need to hear these words today. You never know whose life you might change. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. I hope you go forward from this moment knowing your own worth, knowing that you are not dog food. You are a feast, and the right people will know how to savor every bite. Take care of yourselves, love yourselves, and never, ever let anyone make you feel less than the incredible person you are. Until next time, I am sending you all my love.